Energy and Environment Committee meeting. Today's Tuesday, June the 21st, room 1010 City Hall. I'm sorry for the late start. It's about 9:17. I'm Councilwoman Jan Perry, joined by Councilmember Tony Cardenas. So, Mr. CLA, what's our first item?
Madam Chair, you have a 4-item agenda. We'd like to actually recommend for consent item number 3, which relates to sale of an easement to the County of Inyo for $5,000 for the development of a water system for the town of Independence.
Is that a market rate? Market rate?
At market rate.
Okay.
And
without objection.
then following that, we've got item number 1 and 2, which are very similar items which relate to sewer service charge appeals, commercial appeals. The Bureau of Sanitation, well, the Board of Public Works has actually denied both of these appeals, but they've been willing to pay a year back from the date of complaint. The appellants are not here. If you wish to hear a brief presentation from staff, we could do so.
Let's see, what is the department resolve, the payment plan? Oh, okay. I'll hear from the council office, or the CAO.
Good morning, Lisa Mowry from the Bureau of Sanitation. In the first case, this is a property, it's a corner property. There are 3 water meters. The premises has a connection to the city sewer. So when the meters were set up and the accounts opened back in 1975, all of the meters received the sewer service charge. Because this is a commercial property, it was set at the default rate of 90%, which assumes 10% of the water does not go to the sewer and the customer does not pay sewer service charge on it. In October of 2009, we got a request from the customer to look at their property and give them a sewer service charge adjustment because they had a significant amount of irrigation. Sanitation reviewed their request, found that 2 of the meters serving the premises only irrigate the property, and the 3rd meter is the one that provides the water that's actually used in the buildings and discharges to the sewer. So we found that they met the requirements to receive a sewer service charge adjustment, and the 2 irrigation meters had the sewer service charge removed from that, retroactive for 30 days, which is the limit given in the Los Angeles Municipal Code 614107H. The customers appealed that decision to the Board of Public Works and requested a refund of all of the sewer service charges going back to 1975. This is not within the authority of the Board of Public Works for any property that does have a connection to the sewer. The requirement, if the customer feels that they aren't sending all of the water to the sewer, for instance, in this case where they have significant irrigation, the requirement is on the customer to notify the city. We have 640,000 customers. We can't possibly know how all of them are using water on this site. Once they do that, we're more than happy to go out and investigate and make sure they're being charged correctly. So when this appeal went to the board, they granted another 11 months of adjustment for a 1-year total, which is the limit under the government code claims requirement. They did not have any authority to grant more than the 1 year. The customers here today appealing that decision, requesting again retroactivity going back to 1975, and their most recent claim also requests that we include interest as well as pay attorney's fees.
Okay.
Good morning, Deputy City Attorney John Carvalho, and I'm here in the event that the committee has any questions regarding the legal arguments by Good Shepherd's legal counsel.
Is anybody here from the council office?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. We, at this point, are still waiting to get the full information on this issue. So the council member is unfortunately not able to be here, so we are not going to take a position at this point.
Okay, put your name for the record.
Saeed Ali, Chief Deputy for Council Member Richard Oliver.
Well, let's see. I could hold this in committee until we. When are you? Would you like us to hold this in committee?
And that would relate to the first one, which is in our district. The other one is in Council District 12.
That would be very appreciated.
All right.
On item 1.
On item 1. Okay. Okay. So we'll hold item 1 in committee, and then have that back in what, 2 weeks?
Certainly.
All right. See if you can get the information right.
Hold on,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to clarify. In both cases, they're asking for retroactive beyond 1 year.
Correct.
What other guidelines or case law or other indicators would lead anybody to believe, not-for-profit or for-profit, that they could actually get retroactive to, 7 years, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years? Is there anything that we should be concerned about as far as case law or statute, or maybe federal law supersedes local law, but you have to go to court in order to get a judge to say so? I mean, what's the case here?
Well, the authority that Good Shepherd's legal counsel presented in their claim and in their letters to the board and their presentation to the Board of Public Works.
Can you pull the mic a little closer, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Those legal arguments, they're not meritorious. They're based on a government code section that doesn't apply, and based
I'm sorry,
on
government code section that what?
that does not apply to the facts in this case, and based on case law that doesn't apply to the facts in this case. And they cite to that case law and they cite to that statute based on their misrepresentation, really, of the facts. They're connected to the city's sewer system, and the case and the government code section that they rely on deals with situations where a property owner is not connected to a municipal sewer system.
Okay. And if they were not connected, then that's a whole separate argument.
That would be a quite different scenario.
Okay. And then in those cases, there is or is not a statute of time?
If it is a property owner that's not connected to the sewer system and it's being charged a sewer fee, then there are two limitations periods that apply.
Okay.
One, it's actually from January 1st, 1992 going forward, it's a 180-day claims period. The property owner must make a claim within 180 days of their payment. Prior to that date, prior to January 1st, 1992, there is no limitations period.
Okay, so it's interesting in the Good Shepherd one, since they're talking about 1975, if they were correct, then they would get the benefit of 1975 to 1992 of a certain category of retroactive dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 1992 forward, they could only get 180 days worth of retroactive?
They would have to make their claim 180 days after payment. So you're correct. If they fell into that category of property owners that are not connected to the sewer system and are being charged a sewer service charge, then they would take that benefit of
So in
that.
other words, so I can understand this correctly, a payment that was made in the year 2000, and then all of a sudden they let us know in 2011, hey, wait a minute, we shouldn't have been paying at all since 19 whatever. So the bottom line is, on the second category of time after 1992, they don't have, we would not be obligated to pay them back on the payment made in the year 2000. Only payments within 180 days of them notifying us?
If they were relying on that government code section, it would be 180 days under that government code section.
Okay. So, forgive me,
Yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, I just want to understand. So basically what they're doing right here is they're trying to appeal to the legislative body now at this point in time to see if we're willing to feel sorry for them or something and go outside of case law, et cetera, and then just decide as a separate body with the authority to say, we'll give them 5 years, or we'll give them 10 years, or we'll give them 30 years.
It would be a gratuitous act, correct?
What's that?
It would be a gratuitous act upon the
Okay.
city council if they...
And as our lawyer, if we gave such a gratuitous act, aren't we giving a gift of public funds?
That would be somebody's argument, possibly.
So then we could get sued by a taxpayer or a ratepayer, saying, hey, hold on a second, you can't give away my money.
That would be a possibility.
I'm not saying it would happen, but that technically could open that opportunity up if it seemed like we were just feeling sorry for somebody or trying to be gracious or what have you, or and then just go beyond statute, beyond case law, and just say, well, they're nice people and we'll give them 17 years worth of retroactive.
Correct.
I just
Thank you.
wanted to hold it in committee so that the
Sure.
council office can...
But it's going to come back.
Yeah, it's going to come back. Yeah, no, it's fine.
That's it, yeah.
And if you can get that information in the next 2 weeks so we can wrap this up, I would appreciate it. Okay, so we'll hold number 1 in committee, then we go to number 2, which structurally is the same, with the difference being that one's a nonprofit and the other one isn't. Same situation though, right?
Very, very true. It's the issue of the statute of limitations. In the second case, this deals with 3 meters that service the common area of a residential property development. These meters began being assessed the sewer service charge back in 2004. We got the request in October 2009 to review it, and it was determined that these meters only served irrigation. There was not a clubhouse, a guardhouse, anything like that connected. So the sewer service charge was set to 0% for these. Again, the customer requested and appealed to the Board of Public Works for additional retroactivity back to 2004. Again, in this case, the board granted the additional 11 months so that there was 1 year worth of refund, but again, don't have the authority to grant anything more than that 1 year.
Okay, and before we get into this, is anybody here from CD 12? Okay. You know, we look at the limitations of the code, and I mean, as a courtesy, can you call on the 12th and see if anybody wants to come up and say something while we've got this on the table? And Mr. Cardenas, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. What is, there are situations where a department, like whether it be Department of Sanitation, Water and Power, what have you, where we find out that we were under collecting or the meter wasn't working or what have you. What's the statute there? Are you familiar with that? As far as us as a collector of fees, what our statute is? We go, oops, we can only go back 12 months, or how far can we go back?
I haven't, you know, I apologize, Council Member, but I wasn't prepared for item number 2.
Okay, all right.
I can speak to that one.
Thank you.
What our practice is, if the issue was somehow a city error, they weren't entered into the billing system, they were entered incorrectly and weren't paying the full amount, then we only make a correction to them going forward.
Okay.
We don't go after any retroactive billings.
Okay. And then a situation where maybe they jerry-rigged something or what have you?
We have had some cases, for instance, we had one case where an industrial customer was receiving water from another source. Because it wasn't through Department of Water and Power, they weren't paying a sewer service charge on it. We found out about it through their industrial waste permit, and we did work with them and did bill them retroactively for, I think that was approximately 1 year they had been discharging to our system. Because in that case, it wasn't a city error, it was something the customer should have shared with us, so they worked with us to pay that.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Any? No? Hold on a second. Okay. You know, I'd be inclined to follow Mr. Cardenas's logic in this matter also. As a courtesy to the council office, I would like to leave the record open on this one. In the first case, we do have a representative from the district here, so they're waiting for more information. I wouldn't mind moving this forward. Mr. Cardenas has some questions to council and let them make a determination on the floor. I don't necessarily want to hold this one here. Mr. Cardenas?
Yeah, that council office could actually ask for more time in council, correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I'm noticing that in one case, it was in October of 2010, that the Board of Public Works did in fact grant a refund of up to 1 year, and then in the first case, it was in January of this year. Have they received that portion of the payment that they were granted by the Board of Public Works, or that's still in abeyance until it goes through this process?
Those have been processed. They have received the 1 year refund.
Now, if they cash them, is it case closed, or did we put payment in full on the bottom? Because the industry I came from, that was our understanding. If somebody cashes a check and it says payment in full and they cash it, then that gives us a stronger case to say we're done.
Well, in this case, they received it as a credit on their DWP bill. It was conveyed to both of the customers, both by the board and by sanitation, that 1 year is the limit according to the LAMC, state law, but they do have the ability to appeal it to the city council.
Okay. So in both cases, we didn't have them sign a document.
No.
We just credited them, we notified them, credited them, et cetera. So it wasn't like they signed a document where it says we're happy now or whatever.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move this one,
Move the item.
yeah, and then we'll do item 1. And then 3 is continued, so we'll go to item 4.
Actually, 3 was recommended consent.
Consent, I'm sorry, consent, sorry about that. Consent. And then item 4 is our next item. Who's here on item 4? You want to read that into the record?
That whole group.
That whole crew.
Okay, want to tell us what this is for the record, Mr. CLA?
PWP report, city attorney ordinance relative to proposed geothermal lease agreement with SCAPA relative to the feasibility exploration of potential development of geothermal resources, Salt Sea location. This matter was continued from your April 5th meeting. At that time, the committee requested a report from the city attorney's office with respect to the standard of 30-year leases and the standard of best interest of the city with regard to 30-year leases. That report has been submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. And just for the record, if you can just talk about the standard of best interest, a few examples of 30-year or more lease arrangements, give us the key terms of this 35-year lease agreement, and I believe the situation requires a memorandum of understanding between the department and SCPPA members for the geothermal feasibility and exploration project. Now, just a little bit, give me some background information on the funding commitments that it would entail.
Good morning, council members. As of date, the department has executed an amended memorandum of understanding with SCAPA pertaining to the development of a geothermal project or exploration and feasibility of a geothermal project that has been passed for approximately a year now, if my memory serves correctly. With respect to transmission arrangements, which was a concern raised at the last E&E committee meeting, that has been resolved. The board recently approved a transmission service agreement for Imperial Irrigation District's Path 42 upgrade, which will allow for transmission out of that area in the event this project moves forward, and that was approved on June 7th at the board meeting. The Charter 245 requirements were met as of June 17th, so that's now an executed agreement. With respect to other 30-year leases, I got the request yesterday, so I haven't been able to submit to investigate that, but from my experience as a city attorney, it's my understanding the length of those types of leases usually are addressed with real property leases to third parties, and I would have to have my real estate attorney to address, you know, under what circumstances that's been grounded. It's my understanding that our government liaison submitted an example of a Mono County annual lease, which I didn't have privy to prior to this meeting.
They submitted it for this item?
It was submitted as a sample for this item, yes, to the CLA in response to the request we received yesterday. And also I know in dealing with fiber optic enterprises, there have been a number of occasions where the city council have approved 20-year leases and then also granted extensions. Now, with respect to whether a lease has been granted for a full 35 years to fiber optics, it's usually, my experience has been 20, and then there have been either replacement agreements or extended agreements. With respect to the material terms of this geothermal lease, the primary term is for 3 years. It's only if certain milestones and circumstances are met does SCAPA have the option to even extend the lease. And there has to be a confirmation that geothermal resources can be produced in commercial quantity in accordance with the Code of Regulations. So it's not a burden that's easy to meet. There has to be the exploration, confirmation of that there is a geothermal resource, and also a further confirmation that it can be produced in commercial quantity. Otherwise, the term is expired after 3 years.
Okay. This might not be a question for you, maybe for DWP. Do you know how much revenue the department is going to derive from the lease component of this agreement? And tell us what the property is currently being used for.
My name is Brian Koch. I'm the manager of resource development. Randy Howard spoke to you in the past on this item.
You're from which?
DWP.
Okay.
Sorry. The lease rate would be about $311,000 for this amount of land. The land is currently undeveloped. It's not being used for any productive purpose. It's
That's $311,000 per
year.
Okay.
Per annum. And so there is no use of the land right now. The development plan, the geothermal exploration and feasibility plan is being developed, and if the lease terms were to be approved, the MOU has already been approved, and then we would subsequently continue with a exploration and feasibility plan.
Okay, so you've come to terms. The level of funding that is required and the source of that funding, would you tell us what that is?
The geothermal funding, if for the MOU, which is separate from this specific item, has been budgeted, and there is a SCAPA MOU that would cover that. The other SCAPA members are in the process of approving the MOU. The department board approved it on February 5th, I believe, of this year. So the funding in that area is about $9 million to start with for phase 1. And that would be funded under existing budget items in the department.
What are the two phases of the project? Can you lay that out for us? And at what point does the project expand from 50 megawatts to a 200 megawatt facility?
The initial exploration would be looking for a 50 megawatt resource. That would be considered phase 1. Beyond that, the ultimate potential of the lands combined, both the IID lands and the DWP lands, may be up to 200 megawatts. So phase 2 would be 150 megawatts in addition to the 50 initial, so it would be up to 200 megawatts.
Now, overarching issue is the potential for rate increase. Give me some idea of the potential for impacts to ratepayers if the department participates in phase 2 of this exploration. And did the department factor that in their latest presentation on potential for rate increases?
The initial funding for the exploration phase is in the budgets now as presented. If we had successful findings of geothermal potential, there would have to be a project agreement that would be approved later. The analysis of the exact project and the energy cost would then be presented to the board, and the decision at that point of how it affects the ratepayers would be specific at that time. But the funding for the exploration is in the budget, per se, for phase 1.
If a facility ultimately gets developed, how's that going to impact the department's renewable portfolio goals at the 50-watt mega level and again at the 200 megawatt level?
A 50 megawatt project would generate about 1% of our energy load. 200 megawatt project would be maybe 4% of our energy load. So that would be part of our long-term 33% by 2020 target. The integrated resource plan currently anticipates or desires 320 megawatts of geothermal over the next 10 years. So this could be a substantial part of that.
I'm going to ask Ms. Yancey a question, too. See, you don't have to write the answer.
Okay.
Got it? Any examples of any other 30-year leases? I think Ms. Yancey may have some. I just have one more question after that.
Wendy Yancey, Water and Power. I did find actually 2 examples of 30-year leases approved by this body. One was with DWP for our Mono Lake facilities, and then there was one by the airport out at Van Nuys Airport. So those were 2 that I was able to find, just examples of 30-year leases that we've let.
Now, since this is a long-term lease that actually exceeds 30 years by 5 years, the council does have to make a finding that the term is in the best interest of the city by a 2/3 vote. Now, I see the notes in here from the city attorney with commentary that there is no impediment to making that finding, but I would just like to hear how entering into this agreement is in the best interest of the city.
That's me.
Yeah, you want the business factors on
The
that.
business case for a 30-year lease, which would basically be after the 3-year period or the 5-year period of the exploration feasibility, it would lower the ultimate costs of the geothermal energy that would come out of the project. You have a very high fixed costs for geothermal projects, the capital cost of building the facility. It would lower the energy cost over that period by at least $2 a megawatt hour to go for that additional 5 years from the 30, say, to 35-year. So it would be a substantial cost savings to have a longer lease period. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Mr. Curtis? Questions? All right. So, want to move to approve this?
Move it.
Move to approve. All right. Well, communication, we don't have a forum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, this marks the end of our agenda. Any items that are not on the agenda, well, this is a public comment period, so for anyone who wishes to comment on items that are not on the agenda, this is the time to come forward and speak. Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.